Can we go?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna go. Yeah, so I didn't want, the problem was, I didn't want them to know what I was doing. I didn't want to tell anybody I was writing about them because the college is kind of embarrassed by them. But they do have them in an archive room. Now, it's not all of them because they're literally tons of stone. So you can't fault them. What are they going to do with them? They don't want to throw them away, but they stored a bunch of them under the stage at the school, like an electrical room. And then they have a little archive room. And you can call and make an appointment. This nice little woman said, sure, you can come see them. I'll let you in. So I drove up there and I was terrible. I'm still bad about not introducing myself and telling people I'm a writer. I don't know, it's a thing. But I went in and I was afraid because if you watch, like if you look online, if you look up the Dare Stones, you'll see like History Channel stuff and it will be like searching for Sasquatch and the Dare Stone, you know? So you don't know what kind of people are going in to see this thing. And I didn't know who I was going to meet. And I go in and this nice little quiet woman in this tiny little archive, and there they are sitting out. And she just let me look, and they got other history for the school and from Gainesville, and then these stones are sitting out. And at the time, the main stone was not even in a glass case. It was just out on the table. Now, maybe she took it out for me to see. I don't know. But I stood there in front of it, and I was just curious. That's why I went up there. But I started to cry. And that poor little woman looked at me like, honey. And I was saying, I'm sorry, I'm not crazy. I don't know. And I really didn't know why but I was really upset. And I had to get in my car and drive back home. And the whole time I was getting more upset instead of calming down. And I realized about halfway home, that I was mad. I was really angry that it might have been her. And that meant her story had been lost twice because it was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment the first time, and it was an embarrassment the second time. And I also realized that I didn't care if it was real because Eleanor was 19 and hugely pregnant when she crossed with her father and her new husband, 19, to who knows where. You know, she left London. That's not where she ended up. And Dad left, and if anything about the stone is true, fine. Either way, she was standing there by herself, and it wasn't like a Mary Tyler Moore moment, you know? I don't think if I had been Eleanor, I would have been thinking, wow, we're really gonna make it now. I think you would have known. And I think the only thing that 19-year-old girl wanted was to be remembered. And I was standing in Gainesville, Georgia, a young mother. I was remembering her 400 years later. So it was her story. It was part of her story now. I don't know what the question was anymore.
And then you're ready. So
at that point, I realized, okay, so who's this going to matter to be remembered? That she's remembered. Who's remembering her? Who would be? Who is it going to matter to when that stone is debunked and all that history is dismissed and it becomes a joke and it becomes something you watch on the History Channel that's like Sasquatch? Who does that matter to? Your family. Where's Eleanor's family at that point? So I said, I know 1591 is carved on the stone. That's when it's lost and left on the side of the road up there. I know in 1942, it becomes a joke. It's lost again. Where was that sucker all those years in between? And who did it matter to? So I wrote a story set in 1945, the years after the stone was debunked, at the end of World War II, for another woman standing at the edge of a whole new world, lots of unknown, with her daughter. And I thought, she needs to figure out what that means to her. Does it matter if it's true? Or just if you tell the story?
That
once you made that decision, they all kind of come
So
together.
Alice and Penn became the bulk of the book. And then Eleanor's tale is something that is a story passed down in their family, which may or may not be true. It's a story told from mother to daughter, like a game of telephone, so it changes a little bit. And it's speculative history, it's speculative historical fiction. So it's not that dual timeline thing, but it's Eleanor's story the way your mother would tell it to you. So maybe not the truth, because, your mother doesn't necessarily tell you the truth about your family. And she doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story, right? She tells you the pieces that you need as you're growing up, when you need them, and what they need to teach you. And then sometimes she runs out of time. So you may not get the whole story. So that's how the book is structured. And once I wrote Alice and Penn's story in 1945, Eleanor's tale comes in between. And they discover it.
So let's talk about settings. So your first novel, The River Witch, and this one both take place in the low country of coastal Georgia with the tidal marshes and all those tiny islands and all. So what draws you to that area time and again, being from North Georgia?
I tried to set this book initially. We talked about this one time. I tried to set this book in North Georgia because of the story that's on the stones, all of the Dare stones, where it brings her down into North Georgia. And I thought, oh, I live in North Georgia. That'll be easy. I'll do that. Well, I have this weird thing where I associate color very strongly with people, individuals, or places. And I associate it when I write as well with my setting. And the whole time I had it set in North Georgia, I kept saying to my husband, it is the wrong color. It's the wrong color. And we took a trip to Savannah, which we do frequently. And I realized, it's the right color. This is where it's supposed to be. And so I switched the setting to Savannah. But I think this is why. I think the reason I keep gravitating to those coastal areas and an island in particular, or a marsh in particular, is because I think I write origin stories. And I'm looking for places that are encapsulated, little places where I can encapsulate a character that's out of time and out of place. And it's a place where something is growing and born, and I don't know.
And they're almost primordial.
Yeah, and
Because they're never
so there's
developed.
and there's something about that, being able to step out of a moving modern existence and really shrink it down into that moment. That's the only answer I have, and the one I'm working on now is again a coastal story. I have a town involved, so it's a little different, but I'm still working through whatever that is that I've got in my head.
So Annelle mentioned just how central you are to the local writing.
By accident.
Well, talk about that. So how did that web, get woven, and what do you love about being around other writers?
This is always the funniest question to me, because you have no idea how hard it is to make me leave my house. I haven't left my house all week. Yesterday I went to the grocery store. It was a big deal. So I think it's funny. My husband and I talk about this a lot. It's an accident that I end up involved in things, always an accident. I think though, at the core, it is that I'm not a joiner, but I can't stand for anybody else to be left out or lonely. And so I collect people that way. And I like to teach. I don't like to join, but I like to teach. because I like to, what is the word for that? It's the same thing that you do. There's no meaning. There's no meaning in telling a story unless you're telling the story or sharing it. There has to be back and forth, for me anyway. So I like telling a story, but I really like hearing a story. I want other people's stories too. I crave that. And so maybe that's what it is. I like to work behind the scenes. I love doing this part when I'm teaching, but I don't want to be the star. I want to help somebody else do that. And so I did that some with She Reads. She Reads is now defunct, but it was a big online book club, and they
She read.
yeah, right. It's over. There's a new one, but the old one. Anyway, they chose my first book and they said, so would you help us? And I said, sure. And I helped create a blog network, because blogging was the big thing at the time. This has been years ago, 10 years ago, maybe. And then I've done that with several groups. And then during the time when I was unable to write this book, and it was making me insane, I thought, well, I need that. I need other people to talk about what they're doing, and I can listen, and maybe that will help me figure out what's going on with me. So I started other things. I started my workshops that I did with other women, because I kept hearing women say, oh, I'm just not creative. I wish I was creative. Wish I had time to be creative. I never do anything creative. And I think we are creative creatures. I think we have to be creating something in our lives, like you have to breathe. So I created the Tinderbox workshops that turned into retreats, and the same with the Milton Literary Festival. And I like to make a space for other people's voices. I want to hear what other people's stories
I
are.
like to facilitate.
That's the word. Thank you, writer.
So readers always want to know about a writer's process. Do you write in the morning, in the evening? Do you write all at once, or do you try to put, something on the page each day? What's your process?
It's awful. I'm terrible. Like I digress. It's not terrible. What I have learned is I'm not an academic writer. What I've learned is that I am always writing. I don't stop. I hate Christmas Day, and I figured out why this year, because I'm supposed to stop. I'm supposed to be in the day, and my brain wants to be working all the time. So I've learned that I'm not just writing if I'm sitting at my laptop. I'm writing all the time. I'm writing right now, because I'm collecting little things, and I'm observing and thinking. And even as I talk about my own writing, I'm realizing what I'm working on now. Oh, that's what that is that I need to be doing that I've forgotten. So technically, I'm always writing. Every day making words. Some days are good and some days are not. I'm learning that it's more like a roller coaster for me. I have days where I'm very anxious, and I sit down and I try and do a word count, and I don't do that at all. I end up researching, or I delete half of what I did the day before, and I go backwards more than I go forwards. So it's messy, and I'm kind of a type A. I want there to be an outline. I want there to be every day the same, and I want a whiteboard that everything just works out and it's very scheduled. And my process is not that at all. So if I have any advice, it's just to understand. Maybe it's why I like a marsh. It's just kind of a mess, and I wander around in it. And some days I have something that I'm thrilled with, and I try and remember that the next day, because the next day it's not going to be that way. I may erase half of it the next day. And it's just little steps forward and little steps back, and trusting that the bigger form of what I'm trying to do is going to come together. Terrible answer.
No, that's a great answer. And it's very familiar, because I'm the kind of writer where I'll write something and the next day I'll come back and edit that.
I do it too. I
And-
cannot just
I
leave
can't
it.
move forward
I can't
unless
either.
I'm really happy with what I did previously. And so I totally get oh no, this is all crap, I can redo it all,
I do it.
rather than marching forward.
I know, and some people can do
Reading.
that, and they're probably the people that write a book a year. I cannot. People that write 2 or 3 books a year, I cannot. I'm slow like a tortoise, and it's painful. And then there are days where I'm manic. I'm so thrilled with what comes out of it. But it's because I had the tortoise days that I have today. That's
The hair.
yes.
Right. Some days good to be the hair.
Mhm.
And do you ever have days where you sit down and look at the previous day's work and you don't remember having
Oh, yeah.
written it?
Oh yeah.
Where it almost seems to have come from somebody else?
Yes.
Writers are weird.
It's
I know
all
that
this
sounds very strange to
subconscious game that you play with yourself. My favorite thing, and the worst part about it is you get to the end and you look at it, and I was trying to explain this to my daughter. It's like I have a night sky, and you start when you get the little plot points out there, and I'm terrible at plot, but I'll do scenes, and here I want these things to happen, and you've got all your little stars, but it's very flat. It's like looking at a drawing or like on a
Picture,
chalkboard, where somebody's drawing little stars. It's very flat. And then the farther you get into your writing, the more 3D it becomes. The day that you finish and you can sit back and look, and one little star lights up here and here, and you start to see they're making constellations. You start to see the connections, and you go, damn, I'm smart. I'm so smart. And you think it looks so simple, and you wish you had been able to see that at the beginning. That's the favorite part and the worst part too, because you want to see the constellations at the beginning and you can't. You just draw little stars on the chalkboard, and then at the end it's good. And then you start over again, and you're like, why can't I see all the constellations?
I had never heard that analogy before. I really like that.
Well, I came up with it last week, so there you go.
It's very familiar though, because I'm going to date myself again. I have the transparency method.
Oh, yeah.
You remember? Okay, everybody
Totally.
here is of a certain age, please. So you remember in school when the teacher would put up a transparency and she would put
Yep.
an additional flimsy on one on top of the other, and there'd be like contours on this one and color on this one. And,
Yep.
and that's how I write, where the first thing is just kind of the blank flat
Yep.
bit, and then you keep
I
adding
know.
flimsies
Yep.
until you've got a picture you can stand.
I had there's a guy that did a snowflake
yours
method, and I liked it. I get all tangled up in that because I want to do it at the beginning. I want it all. And I can't. It makes me crazy for months.
It's hard to be a writer. So tell us about your next writing.
I don't like to talk about it too much, or I do start getting into the crazies. But it is set on the Georgia coast. It is, again, I like to take known history, and then I like obscure things that maybe nobody knows about, and then I like to speculate. So I like to throw the fiction in heavy. I have Cumberland Island sort of as the Greek chorus in the background, and the crumbling mansions. And then St. Mary's is sort of the town, but not really. And there's a library, and it may be a bit of a ghost story.
I see, that's good. It's just enough, just enough. And what's your timeline on it? Do you have a contract? Is it under contract?
It's under
You
contract.
gotta
I should have never done it. It's I'm a 2-year, so it'll be 2024. Please, Lord Jesus, I'm writing it. I'm drafting it right now. It's like I'm clawing my way. Hopefully, she knows my editor. Don't you tell her. I'm brilliant. She knows all about it. Oh my God.
And then last question, then we'll go to Zoom and the audience. What's something that people don't know about you that they'd
Oh,
be interested in? They'd find fascinating?
I don't know.
Talk more about the colors, because that was a conversation we had when I was writing my
Yeah.
chronesthesia.
I was just gonna say I had Elvis's birthday, but this is more fun. Yeah, I guess it's synesthesia. I thought everybody did this. And it was only after I was married and I started making comments about things, and my husband was like, "What are you talking about?" I associate colors, and I've read about synesthesia since it like hit the news a few years ago. I'd never heard of it before. And it turns out 2 of my kids did this too. So it's very funny. I know. So, and colors can change. I don't do this. Some people do this with numbers where they associate a color with a number. I wish I did because I have such issues with math and numbers. I can't even remember numbers. But yeah, I write historical fiction. 16 generations, smart. But colors I associate with people. And your color may change. Like I can't ever quite, I don't dictate it. But I will associate a color with a person. And they're not always colors I like. And sometimes that's difficult because it means I might have a problem with how I feel about the person. And it's not always about their personality or how they look. I don't choose it. It's just immediately I associate a color with a person. And I do the same thing with places. I do this a little bit with music too. If there are certain songs that I think about, it's not like I'm seeing the color. I just think about it that way. I don't know how to put that into words. Yeah, association is the only way I know to explain it. It's almost like, I don't know, it's like a dream in my head, kind of. And I don't do this with food. I don't do it with smells, but I do it with people, places, and music. And I may not like the song, but I like the color I associate it with, so I like the song. Or I may not like the person, but I like the color. Or it's weird. And I do that with places very much. I don't know why, but it definitely is in my books. That's the funny part. I didn't realize this until my first book published, and I had a friend who gave me a box full of gifts that she said had inspired after she read the book. Everything was yellow. I was like, why? And she went back and showed me everything that was yellow in the book. And I thought, that is true. Everything is yellow. And it was specifically with one of the characters, and I associated the color yellow with her. And this book, look at the cover. Do you see the colors? I fought for the colors because those were the colors in my head. And there's not a purple element really here. I guess the key looks a little bit purple, but that blue was really important. The blues and greens and purples I could see, almost like I don't know, what carnival colors kind of in my mind. I don't know why, because that's not what you think when you think about Elizabethan English settlers coming to the coast. But my agent, in fact, was like, ooh, I don't know, it's tropical, it's very tropical. And I said, have you been to the southern United States and the coast? Because they didn't drop them off at Plymouth Rock, this is a whole different place. And so those colors and things are going on in my head when I'm writing, and they definitely come out.
Great. All right, let's go to the audience.
So
Dana?
I have the Zoom people on here, and Francine from Richmond, Virginia wants to let Kimberly know that she loved the book. So loved this book.
Thank you.
It's kind of neat that we have people. So Zoomers, if you're on the Zoom, if you can go in the chat, and if there's people from outside of Georgia or outside of the United States, a lot of times we have people from Ireland and Scotland for some reason. I don't know where they found us. And let us know where you're from. And then we had one question. Oh, we had someone from South Carolina. What could you, Suzanne question is, what could you just not fit into the book that you most wanted to include, either fact or imagine?
Dude, it's like really long. I got most everything in this book that I wanted. I can't think of anything I didn't fit into the book. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, we did take some things out. I took a character out, and he was a bad guy. And I may try and use some of the history that was associated with him in another book, but I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to give it away. So I can't think of anything that I didn't put in the book.
I had heard that actually the original manuscript was shorter, and they
It
kept asking you to
was.
bulk it up.
Yeah, my original submission was about 20,000 words shorter. And then during edits, I added the stuff about the Girl Scouts with a pin that's in there. Existential question is, and it's in this book. It was in the same question was in my first book, and I'm still writing about it now. But I think what we do, at least in my case, we create these characters. We find a situation like the Dare Stone. We find something that intrigues us, that we know we can spend a lot of time with and stay obsessed with. And then we find, that's just for entertainment, for the author, right? And for the reader. And then we find characters to populate. And for me, those characters are people who interest me on this deep level because I want to give them my existential question and see what they do with it. How are you going to answer this so I can learn from it? And then you set them loose. So they're like your mice, right? In your cage, in your experiment. And you see what they do. And you watch them and you play with them and you throw things at them and they'll wrestle with that question for you until the end. And when I get to the end of the book, the way I know I'm done is they have played out whatever they can figure out about that question. It's as far as they can go. And I'm done. Because they can't show me anything else. And so I take my question and I find something new that interests me to entertain me. And I find some new people and I throw in there and I see what they do with my question. But in terms of an actual sequel, no, because they're done. I've done everything I knew to do with them. If I could write a series and live off of it for the next 20 years, Jesus, I would. But that's not how I do it. So I finished with the people in River Witch. I know how it ended for them, what they were able to tell me. And then I started with this one, and now I've started with a new one. Same question, different people, different entertainment.
Yes.
I found it really interesting that you both said you can write something and then go back the next day or a couple days later and read it. I'm so glad you said that because that happens to me. Losing the
You're not.
No.
What do you think that is?
My subconscious. It's like when you wake up.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
so the question is, we had talked about, for those of you on Zoom, so we talked about writing something and then coming back the next day to edit it and not recognizing that we wrote it. I don't remember writing this. This is really good. I don't normally write this good.
That's exactly true. It's usually the good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I always remember that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But
It usually is the good stuff for me. What I was going to say is it's kind of like having a dream. So maybe when you write, you're sort of in a fugue state because it's like having a dream and when you wake up, if you don't talk about it right away, you lose it. Because it's something that you're teasing out of your subconscious when you write. For me, it is the good stuff. And that's usually the stuff I don't remember. The bad stuff is just, I always remember it for some reason. That's what I think it is.
Do you ever think maybe you're tapping into?
Oh, yeah, totally. I know that's, but yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to ask about the peacocks. Is there some significance?
Yes.
so could you talk about the peacocks who populate this book,
Okay,
including the cover?
this is a good story. So I'm glad you guys will enjoy this. So when I first wrote the book, they were swans. And the reason they were swans is because they're mean. And I wanted them to be beautiful and kind of ethereal and weird. I mean, you don't just have a swan in your backyard. You might have a duck come by, but a swan, maybe not. And I wanted them to really represent her mother. So Alice's mother is this character from her memory as a 13-year-old girl, and she was mentally ill, but she was beautiful and beloved, right? But sort of, she couldn't connect. You're not going to love on a swan, right? You can admire it and think it's beautiful, but you're not going to, it's not a teddy bear. It's not a puppy. It's not something you can cuddle with. It doesn't give you a lot of comfort. And I wanted that element to be there. And I wanted them to plague her when she gets back to Evertell, the family home that she returns to, like her mother's memory. She cannot make friends with this thing. She can't figure out how to manage it. Can't change it. It is what it is, but how are you going to live with it? And then we started to do the cover, right? And they put white feathers on the cover. It didn't look anything like this, by the way, nothing. But there were white feathers on the first version. And they looked like chicken feathers to me. And I thought, that is not good. That's not right at all. And even if it looked like a downy feather, it just wasn't pretty. And I just didn't like it. And it didn't feel right. And the color was wrong. And I thought, what is going on here? So my daughter went to Georgia College in Milledgeville. And I freaking love Flannery O'Connor and should have known this from the start. But we were down visiting her, and turns out peacocks shed their feathers, right? And so they have some of her descendants of her peacocks there on the farm in Milledgeville, where Flannery lived. And you can go in the gift shop and buy the peacock feathers. And my daughter brought me home some peacock feathers, and I have them in my living room. And I looked at those feathers and I was trying to explain to them what I wanted for the cover art on the book. And this was the second iteration that we saw with the page and the background colors and blue ribbon. And I said, they had these terrible flowers, horrible flowers on them. And be afraid to say, no, that's not quite the right flower, because we're afraid of what the next one was going to look like. And I looked at them one night and I thought, I know what colors this is supposed to be. And I was seeing those feathers in my living room.